What's up, guys? Today on the AI Operator Podcast, we are joined by Eric Whitmoyer. He is a growth architect, serial entrepreneur, and the CEO of MyBiz Coaches. Now, Eric has actually spent over 2 decades leading teams, driving sales, and scaling companies that collectively have generated more than $1 billion in revenue. And he's on a new mission. It's to empower 1,000 small businesses across the United States to the $1 million mark and do it in a way that's sustainable, systemized, and scalable. Now, in this conversation, we're ultimately going to break down his proven playbook for turning what we would consider chaos inside of a business into clarity and building teams that lead themselves, as well as transforming businesses into assets that can actually thrive without their founders. And that last one, I'm most curious about because I work with a lot of founder-led businesses. We're a founder-led company as well. And we tend to sometimes wear all of the hats in the business. And it reminds me of one of my favorite books, The E-Myth, and it's something I try to come back to every day. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. But Eric, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Jordan. I really appreciate it. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Well, we had a really good just kind of conversation right before the podcast started. Just so everyone knows and the listeners know, Eric is actually in Phoenix, Arizona. He works with small and medium-sized businesses, and we'll get into that here shortly. He has been in the military, if that's correct. You mentioned
it's been a few years. Yeah,
he was in the military. His father was in the military as well.
Yep.
Sounded like amazing.
Yep.
So I'm really interested to see too how military principles have shaped your business life and how you kind of bring those two together, if they have. But I would love to, I guess, start at the beginning, if you will. And you've obviously done so much, but I guess I'm curious. Could you walk us through like your entrepreneurial journey and how you actually got started on that side of things?
Yeah. So I'm probably not as atypical of an entrepreneur. I didn't. I did. I think I sold some pears at the side of the road kind of thing. I might have taken some candy to school and resold it at 3 times the profit or something like that, but not as much. I had planned on being a professional athlete, and like many stories, it didn't work out the way I intended. But I developed my skill set as a leader. I developed my skill set as a understanding how to deliver under pressure, playing athletics and things like that. Ironically, I after my stint in high school didn't play out the way I wanted to, I actually became a professional kickboxer.
Oh, wow.
And it held the United States light heavyweight kickboxing title, even fought for a world title. So it was ironically, as you asked the question about the military and the background of the military, I think that the combination of the military and the kickboxing were 2 things that really played a significant role in my development. More specifically, my leadership skills, which then obviously are key in successfully developing and growing businesses. But yeah, key factors for sure. As an entrepreneur, I think I know my first endeavor was a ice cream distribution company. I used to service like 7-Elevens, AM/PM, something like that. And I was a route salesman. And the company, a bigger dairy company acquired the company that we had, was just a distribution company. And so they said, hey, these routes aren't profitable. So if you want to continue to have a job, you basically got to buy the rights to your job. So I had to beg, borrow, and steal $20,000 to get the business off the ground and launched my ice cream distribution company, or at least my under the guise of my business. Right. But, built that up successfully, sold that. And then I went back to college because I was like, man, I'm busting my butt working 80 hours a week. I'm making a good income. I was probably making close to $100,000 a year in the early 90s at 21, 22, 23 years old. But my days starting at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And some prime hours, right? I'm 21, 22, 23, getting up at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, that's when I was fighting as a professional fighter. But anyway, so I sold the business to go back to school thinking there's got to be an easier way to make that kind of money. Got to school, spent a couple of years and realized this is hard to make a living like this. I need to start another business. So I started a business while I was in school. And so I had that entrepreneurial bug. It definitely kicked in. I leveraged my connections and my resources and learned how to pull things together to create, model. none of them were super successful, but they were good revenue generators. I was able to kind of pull things together. And the one thing that I identify with, Jordan, I think is really valuable at that time, you referenced the E-Myth. Some of the most significant things that I incorporate into my coaching for business owners is, how to understand to build a business where you're not actively involved in all the operations all the time, right? And so I look at those initial endeavors, and that's where I was stuck, right? I'm the operator. I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm doing everything. Even if I had a team, I probably wasn't a good delegator. I know I wasn't a good delegator. And I was super frustrated because I'm constantly burning the candle at both ends. And even if I was making decent money, wasn't crushing it. So, but that's kind of how I got started. Those were the first couple of endeavors. And then just a side note, just to skip forward, I spent 25 years in the wireless industry as a sales executive, and then eventually moved up. I started as a sales rep, store manager, and then moved my way up to a sales executive. So I have a very unique perspective of not just being an entrepreneur, which, by the way, I've had 15 businesses over the last 30 years, but I also successfully helped 2 companies grow to over $100 million in top line revenue.
Amazing.
So, the last company I was with, I was basically employee number 9, and we grew that to 140 stores, 190 million in top line revenue, and we sold that successfully in 2017.
Amazing. Wow.
So I have this.
What?
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what a cool background. I mean, there's so many things to kind of unpack there, and so many different, parts to your journey. And I love talking with people like yourself because I'm very similar to that. I've done so many different roles and things along the way that kind of positioned me to end up where I'm at today. And if you asked me 10 years ago what I would be doing, this would not be it. I wouldn't be living where I'm living, doing what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
it's really interesting how that shapes your leadership style. And you can kind of look back and see the growth, or hopefully see the growth at least,
Yeah.
as you've kind of navigated these different situations.
Yeah, absolutely. That ironically, as you say that, I think that's we bounced a lot. I mentioned my dad was in the military, and then we followed his career when I was younger, and one of the things, I was in different schools all the time, and so I think 2 things kind of come into play in that: the fact that you bounced around a lot, or I bounced around a lot, I should say. Um, I had to adjust every time.
Yeah.
So that taught me skills about reading people and understanding people and being empathetic, so that I could adjust accordingly each time I got introduced to a new group of people. So sales skill set number 1, learn how to read the room, learn how to adapt,
Yeah.
learn how to adjust. And that plays significantly in leadership as well, as you referenced, because if you can't read the room, you're not in charge. You're not leading the group. The group's leading you.
That's a really good point. And oddly enough, I was not a military kid, but I moved schools almost every year or 2 years, which was actually, I didn't even realize this until it was about a year ago that I just realized it because I had a funny story. I had an ex girlfriend who was like, "You don't have any friends." And her point was, when we were in this argument, was that she had, a couple lifelong friends that she's had for 16 plus years. And
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone like that. I have incredible relationships with a lot of people. I have some really, close friends, but not like that. And it kind of, I'm when I don't understand something about myself, I typically go internal and start thinking about it. And I was able to realize that, I was a homeschool kid, and I went from private school to full homeschool to
Mm.
public school when my mom got sick to moving states multiple times. And, so like you said, I had this level of adaptability that I didn't even realize I had until later in life that I think has helped me in a lot of situations. For someone maybe that doesn't have that level of adaptability or doesn't understand how to read the room, where should they start? Because I feel like that's a
Mm.
tough skill to just learn. Where would you have them start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, Jordan, I think that one of the things that we talk about all the time, I got certified as a life coach. Is originally that was what I was going to do, and then I positioned myself in business coaching. When I did the life coach work, I did it with a gentleman named Jack Canfield. He wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul and another book called The Success Principles. And one of the things that I learned extensively working closely with him was getting out of your comfort zone and doing things that you're not comfortable with, right? And literally, I would say entrepreneurship, in my experience, is literally learning to be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? Because that's I say that initially to kind of preface the idea that whatever it is that you're struggling with, it is likely something that you're not comfortable with. Meaning that sounds redundant, but the point being is that if there's a reason your business isn't growing, it's likely because it's something that you haven't taken on that you have to overcome.
Yeah.
And so to say that as it relates to specifically to networking, or not networking, but getting out and meeting people, I would say networking is the way to do it. Get in rooms that you're not familiar with people, get in rooms that you don't know anybody, go somewhere that you've never gone before, and force yourself to have those conversations, allow yourself to grow, and adapt and learn how to communicate with people you're not familiar with. Because too many times we hang around people we're familiar with and we're comfortable with. And for what it's worth, I think there's the last 5 years, and I won't go into details. I don't know exactly how far you want to go into that, but the last 5 years have dramatically impacted people's social skills
Yeah.
and their ability to get out and connect. And we're only now kind of resurfacing that. And a lot of younger people are identifying how hard it is to get out there. And I'm like, I didn't have a choice. It's
Yeah.
but it's a mindset shift, right? And with all the technology, that's another factor as well. But
Yeah, it's I couldn't agree more. And you make a really good point with COVID and how that impacted, I mean, everything too today. In the generation below me, my generation is kind of like in the middle, I would say. We experienced the 90s, right? Early 2000s, and then it really started changing. But the generation below me, their dating is online, their communication is online,
yep,
their schooling is online,
yep,
everything is impersonal, if you will, which creates an interesting dynamic. And if you're already an introverted person, like you said, it's so comfortable not to go outside of that little moat that you've built for yourself.
mm,
But I'm a big believer or proponent to the fact of like, usually the thing you're not doing, you know exactly what it is. It's the first thing that pops into your head when you think about that,
right.
topic. And it's usually the one thing you just won't do that you need to just go do. So I love that. Um, well, I want to talk a little bit about, I believe you have a concept which is the 6 core business competencies.
Correct.
Um, I would love if you could, I guess, share what you're willing to share about those, 6 core competencies, and we can talk a little bit about them. That would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, quick backstory. This really evolved in the last 2 years, and it started with, if I'm being 100% honest, when I started business coaching, I was not seeing this what it is today. I'm approaching 50. We just had a successful exit. I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy working with people and everything like that. But at the end of the day, the reality is this is probably my twilight exit, right? I'm just going to kind of ride this out until I'm done. And this is 6 years ago as I was starting the company. So I didn't really see but I can't do anything small. And so what ends up happening is I get more and more into this. I realize I'm an analytics person. I research the data, and I got a background in accounting and finance. So I'm kind of, I got to dig into the numbers and everything. And as I'm digging into the numbers, I'm realizing, man, businesses fail all the time at like ridiculous rates. 25% in the first year, 50% in the first 5 years, 75% fail before 10 years. So I'm reading stats like that, and I'm like, and oh, by the way, I did some research as I'm writing my book. Um, those numbers haven't changed dramatically in 48 years.
Wow.
Those are comparable within 2 to 3% one way or the other. for those benchmarks for the last 48 years. So either it's really
Wow.
lazy reporting from the SBA, or there's just something inherently wrong in the way that we start and grow businesses. And so after working with clients over the next 4 or 5 years, coming out of COVID and kind of really digging in more and more, I got super passionate about all these people that are struggling to grow businesses. I've seen it. I've been on the side of a business that's grown to $100 million, so I know what that looks like. I kept going back and I'm like, why are these businesses struggling? What is it? And so I was going to get ready to do a podcast with a gentleman. He was the president of the Arizona Business Brokers Association, and Walt Lipsky had been a broker for 38 years. And one of my coaches saw him speak and said, Eric, you got to talk to this guy. He's amazing. Great. I get a conversation with him. I do my research to prepare for the interview, right? And I come out and I say, hey, Walt, I read a statistic that said that 80% of business owners that list their business to sell never sell. How accurate is that? And he goes, look, I don't know if it's 70% or 90%, but it's well in that realm. And I'm like, how do people work, and own a business and make it 10 years and then not be able to sell the business? How does that even happen? And he says to me, and he goes, well, I got these 4 reasons. And he broke them down for me and he laid them out. And he's the very first number one reason is most small business owners don't manage their finances well. They have terrible financial acumen. Second one is they have no leadership transition. There's nobody to take over the business when they sell it. So you're not selling an asset, you're selling your job. So founder-led business, that's one of the biggest problems, is that they never know how to make that transition out of founder-led to being able to transition as an asset. And then the third one was documented policies and procedure, not policy procedure, but systems and procedures, right? Which in the AI space and technology space, that's a big factor, right? That's basically what you're trying to do when you're helping a company, is help streamline those processes. And then the last one was an SOP, sorry. And then the last one was documented marketing and sales processes. So I've got history of, I run a campaign with Facebook, Google, whatever, and I generate X number of leads from X number of dollars and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, lay that all out because he shares those things with me. And I'm like, and he's hitting on these things. And I'm like thinking about, at that point, probably 25 or 35 different businesses I'd worked with. And I'm like, yep. Yeah, I'm just like nodding my head the whole time he's talking. I'm like, so then I start digging in, and over the last 2.5 years, I've just kind of keep digging into it. And so this is where the 6 core competencies come from. One is leadership and vision. What I see over and over and over again, business owners get started to go make $1, just like I did in my first couple of businesses. I didn't have a long-term transition strategy. I was just going out to make a buck. It was a side hustle that turned into a business. Man, a little bit different, but you get the idea. So without the vision of where I'm going, it's like playing golf without knowing where the flag is, right? You start a business, you cannot end up in a good place if you don't know where you're going. You're going to end up in a sand trap. You're going to end up in the water. So the first one is the leadership and vision. And you've got to be a good leader who can lead, show, hey, this is the flag we're going to. This is the point we're going to. Come along with me. Follow me. It's like, so this goes into the military piece, right? Learning to get people to follow you and want to follow you, and know that you're not going to take them walking into a live firefight and get everybody killed. So it's a really important component, right? So one is leadership and vision. The second one is financial acumen. You have to know your numbers. You got to do your due diligence and know your numbers, or you're going to fail miserably. You'll make poor decisions because there'll be gut instinct decisions instead of financial, or not financial, but specifically documented numerical numbers, statistical data that will help you make better decisions. You're still going to make gut decisions from time to time, but at least you're doing it from a database scenario. The third one is sales and marketing, pretty obvious. The fourth one is operational excellence. The fifth one is people development, people management, right? If you're going to grow a business beyond a certain level, it's going to take some people. Even in today's world where we can use AI and leverage AI, you're still going to have VAs. You're still going to have vendor partners, some kind of other people that you're going to work with, and you have to manage them, even though they don't necessarily work directly for you. You still have to manage and lead them. And then the last one is customer service. So you take those 6, and now here's the key. We're only good at any 1 to 3 of those 6 core competencies. So you think about your own personal skill sets and you think about those 6 things. There's probably 2 or 3 of those that you lean heavily into, and you could say, "Yep, I'm very, very confident in these areas." These areas, maybe not so much, and that's the sticking point. That's what's keeping your business from where you are to where you want to go. And so here's the last part of that is if we know that there's a handful of those that we have to solve for, there's only 3 ways to solve for them. You hire for it, you partner for it, or you outsource it.
Hmm.
Problem is if you hire for it, but you don't know how to do it yourself, what are you hiring?
Yeah.
Right. And so that becomes a problem because as a founder who's never really actively built a sales organization, how do you hire a sales manager that's actually going to be able to drive results for your organization, your business, if you don't really know, right? And you can't challenge them when they're not getting the results, right? So partnerships, those are a tough one because typically have a tendency to partner with people that we're familiar with, the people we're alike. So you and I get along. We enjoy surfing. We enjoy doing this. We'll probably have a lot of similar characteristics, and consequently, as a partner, that's not a great partnership because we're both good at the same things. What we ultimately want is we want compliments to one another. I
Yep.
want you to be good at the things I'm not good at, and vice versa. So that's a kind of a miss. And then the third one is the outsourcing, and that's really where we come into play as coaches. Is we come in and we help implement these things, and then hopefully, ideally, help you identify how to hire internally when that's the right thing to do for the business. But I would say today the argument would be you should outsource everything you're not good at,
Yeah.
right? And then, but at least at that point, now the challenge is that if you don't know what you're hiring for, then that's another problem. If you don't know what you're outsourcing, it's just as big of a problem.
Yeah.
So, but that's a quick breakdown of the 6 core competencies and kind of everything that goes into that. It's just what we do is help people lead through that, identify where those gaps are, and then how to shore them up and what kind of solutions we can incorporate.
Amazing. Yeah, those totally make sense. What stood out to me is you'll always be good at a couple of them.
Right.
But you're not going to be good at all of them.
Nope.
And that makes total sense when it comes to the business because you're either neglecting to hire for those, to essentially outsource those in one way or another. And you're trying to do it yourself, which means you're already not good at it. And now you're trying to learn on the job, which means you're making mistakes. You're stepping on those landmines. You're extending the time that it takes. And then you're usually, from my experience, dropping balls in the other courts that you were actually good at. You start dropping the ball in marketing
Absolutely.
because you're focused on, accounting, and you're not an accountant.
Right.
So a question I have for you, and I think this will be super applicable to anyone listening, which is in early stage, obviously you have cash flow challenges, right? And you may need to bring in a marketing partner, let's say, to run your marketing because it is not your wheelhouse. But you also need the revenue to be able to do that. And I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. Is they're on this kind of treadmill of, oh man, I'm going to push on sales and that's going to bring in some revenue, then I'm going to hire the marketing person, but then again I dropped the ball over here, so now the sales are back down, and they go through this roller coaster of trying to figure this out.
Right.
What would you say is maybe a couple simple steps or something they could do today that helps them move from I need to hire from this role but I don't know how to we have this person in place and we have the revenue to do that?
Yeah. Uh, so many different ways I can go with this. So the first thing I would say would be, because this goes back to my analytics here. 82% of all businesses that fail, the number one reason they fail is they didn't have enough cash.
Mm,
So, and
yeah.
the two stories there are, couldn't get sales to go fast enough, couldn't raise the ship fast enough to bring in the revenue to support the growth. Or the second thing is I didn't have access to capital, credit, something that would help me bridge the gap,
Yeah.
especially if I didn't understand the cash flow model of my business, which is often
Yeah.
a problem. So those are the two reasons that really kind of play into what you're suggesting, right? And so, I mean, I had that same problem with my business, and then when I started the coaching business, I'm like, okay, I'm getting going, and I've got revenue coming in, but then I'm like, to go from where I am to really where I want to go, I need to make this big leap,
Yeah.
and need the resources to be able to pay for that, and I don't have access to that. So one of the things is learning how to leverage credit and things like that, but also learning how to leverage those relationships, so those partnerships that you referenced, those vendor relationships. Uh, the I would say that that's probably one of the most important things is identifying a company. Don't go and try and create your own sales organization. Find a partner who's going to create a lead generation process for you. Find a company that will do the sales, the closing of the sales. Because here's the thing, for instance, as a founder led business, I will tell you the first year and a half that I did this, I struggled immensely selling coaching. I had sold for years. I'm a really good salesperson, but I had never sold myself,
Yeah.
which is a whole nother dynamic that I was not familiar with and did not understand it was going to be a challenge. So when I hear, now that sometimes in some cases, some people are really good at whatever they're selling, right? If I'm selling some other kind of, but then they're probably lacking somewhere else. But the challenge is often that the conundrum of I need the revenue to pay for the marketing. You first of all, don't try and bring marketing in-house when you're that small. You're less than $1 million. That's the last thing you want to do. You
Yeah.
absolutely want to leverage somebody who's already in that space, a competent professional that you can rely on, that you can trust, that knows and gets results. You can quantify the results that they've produced, either by talking to previous existing clients or whatever, and then bring them into the mix. Because at the end of the day, that's your best chance of finding success in that phase. By the way, one of the things that we talk about in the core competencies is there's a series of phases. I outlined 8 of them, and then the very first phase is $0 to $100,000. So, for instance, in that phase, the only thing you really focus on out of the 6 core competencies predominantly is sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Right. It's just about bringing in revenue. And then when you move from that one to the 100 to 250,000, that second phase is you're still doing a lot of the same thing. It's a little bit more operations, a little bit more managing the money, but it's sales and marketing.
Yeah.
But once you get to that point, you're at the point now when you go from 100 to 250 and you get into that phase, you've got to build predictable sales processes that get results month in and month out. And if you don't, that's going to keep you from going where you want to go.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I like how you mentioned, leveraging partners. We've seen success with either ourselves or other clients also, bringing in partners where they're sharing in the risk, which
Mhm.
reduces upfront investment, right?
Yep.
And obviously, understanding your financials is going to be important because you don't want to get into a sour deal necessarily, but some revenue is better than no revenue. And even if they're taking, 20%, let's say on the sales side, that's still 80% more than you had before.
That's it.
Um, so that's I love that.
Well, and I would add to that, Jordan, is that at that phase of scale that you're at, your margins are, particularly in a service-based business, which, by the way, full disclosure, that's predominantly where we focus, a lot of service-based businesses. But if you're in a service-based business, the reality is you got decent margins when you're that small. You don't have a whole bunch of infrastructure. So you're whining about 80%, at the end of the day, to your point, 80% is what you did not have. And until you learn
Yeah.
how to duplicate your sales results on a consistent basis over and over and over, you have nothing. Right. So it's like, and here's the other thing I would say, bring in a partner, have them help you develop those sales and those marketing and sales strategies so that you're getting those consistent results, and then pay attention, because now you can go back and you can replicate this internally when you're ready for it, when you have the
Yeah.
resources to do it. Right. But those increased sales will help you build the cash flow that you need to then be able to develop that and replicate that in-house. And
Yeah.
in some cases, it might not make sense at all. Like I said before, in many cases, it makes sense just to outsource everything. Anything that's not your core competency may be a good idea to outsource, because then you don't have to try and learn it. Then it comes down to how well do you negotiate deals,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Makes total sense. Um, when it, I totally forgot what question I was going to ask. Oh my gosh, I had such a good one and I just totally blanked. That happens sometimes, right? That's funny. Um, well, so you've talked a lot about metrics and reporting, and obviously you're a projections guy with the accounting background that you had mentioned. Us being a sales operations company and a sales ops company, if you will, we also look at projections and metrics a lot, and it's something I would say the primary reason why, from the sales organization side, companies fail to scale their sales teams is just a lack of, even if they can't track day-to-day metrics, there's just no projection. So like you said, it's kind of like golfing without knowing where the hole is. And it's even worse when sales and marketing are looking at completely different numbers and they have a different outcome that they're essentially trying to achieve. And it's like, I feel like they fall into this guise of, we want to scale, but that means nothing if we don't define what scaling means. And it's similar for marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. If we have different definitions on those throughout the organization, we're going to get into a big mess. And we see it all the time. Now, for you, what would you say are the biggest gaps in sales processes that you see with the clients that you guys work with?
Yeah, it's again, great question. So first and foremost, when I first started coaching and having a significant background in sales, I would have people come to me and say, I need more leads. And I would say, I hear you and I could relate. I'm still trying to build my business, but let me ask you, how many conversations are you having a month? Oh, maybe I don't know. Okay, well, that's problem number one. One, we don't even know how many people we're talking to, right?
Yeah.
So going back to your metrics analysis, right? But more importantly, here's what I need to know is, until I know how many conversations you're having and then how many you're converting, I don't know if this is a lead problem or a conversion problem.
Yeah.
Right. Once I've identified that you had 100 conversations, I'm sorry, you connected with 100 people to have 20 conversations to close 3 people. That's 15%. I'm going to lean on that's a conversion problem, not a lead problem. Right.
Yeah.
So and to that point, then, if you're at 30%, I'd say, yeah, you're probably in a good place. I wouldn't, depending on what you're selling, a high ticket transaction or a mid to high ticket transaction, 30% closing, I'd be pretty happy with that. I'd be very happy with that, quite honestly. 20%, okay, 10%, I got a problem. And it's a
Yeah.
conversion problem. That means there's something wrong with the sales process. So, but you can't do that with data without data, right? You
Yeah.
can't identify where the gaps are without the data. And that's why, to your point earlier, that's the big factor. You have to find the ways to measure that.
Yeah.
So, then once you identify it's a conversion or a lead generation problem, now you can know where to go lean into and figure out what's more important now. Do I need to ramp up advertising? And then, because
Yeah.
it could be a conversion problem, there could be one other factor I didn't mention, Jordan, is could be, I say conversion, something wrong with the sales process. Maybe you're just not good at closing, right?
Yeah.
But it also could be you're talking to unqualified candidates. That's a whole nother, and that is a component of the marketing, but you have to identify that from the metrics, because if I'm having a bunch of conversations and none of them are closing and I feel pretty good about my sales process, I got to go back and look and say, well, every one of them saying, yeah, that's out of my price range. They're
Yeah.
unqualified clients. I didn't do a good job in that process.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I had mentioned, I think the projections is so important, because to your point, a lot of people wait on projections till they have numbers already, which
Yep.
I think is an interesting way to do it. They're like, oh, well, we got to get some data before we can create a projection. And I'm like, yeah, or we could just guess, right? Like
Right. You have to start
your,
with a benchmark.
yeah, yeah. So, hey, what do you think would be a good closing rate?
Right.
Like 10, 20, 30. Like, okay, 30 sounds good. Perfect. Write it down. And then we can optimize towards that. And, you may find out pretty quickly that, maybe 30 is unrealistic for your
Mm.
business, but you can always adjust that down if needed. And we see this challenge a lot where we just don't set projections, and then we don't track things inside of our organization. I want to take a moment for anyone listening. You don't need a data lake. You don't need MySQL databases. You do not need fancy dashboards. You can use a pen and paper and write it down in your notebook if that's the only solution you have, right? But that is still better than nothing. And something that we see a lot of our clients struggle with is accountability when it
Mm,
just simply comes to data. And I think you are either a data driven company or you're not. There really isn't in between. And I think it's built on a cultural level at the highest level of, is the founder a data driven person and do they build that into their culture? Does the C level and the executives are they data driven and is it part of their culture? And it goes all the way down to the lowest level employee. A lot of times I see founders who preach data driven, but they are not, and they don't hold their teams accountable. And if they're not holding their leadership teams accountable to data driven decisions, then no one below them is going to be a data
nope,
driven person. You might have one,
nope.
one data guy, right? If you're a big enough company,
Right,
who dreams and wants that to be a thing. So
right.
I really think that is something that we see organizations struggle with, that we just don't have the accountability and the leadership inside of the organization to look through that lens and demand a level of attention to detail when it comes to reporting.
Yeah,
So I love that. Now
yeah.
I got a couple. I know we're coming up on time. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate everything that you shared with the audience so far, and it's been great to pick your brain. I got a couple quick fire questions that I'd love to run through.
Be- be-
The first one, yeah,
Before
go
we
for it.
hit that, can I say one
Yes,
thing
please,
to that comment you just made?
please.
That data piece is so impactful. As I'm going to share this with you. I helped two companies grow to well over 100 million. One was 225 million, one was about 190 million. The first one failed and went bankrupt. Okay? And I was a key executive of that organization and I fought immensely to get open reporting and share the data and let the leadership teams know where we stood. And the owner was very protective of it and I, there were reasons for that after the fact that we found out later. But the point was that data being kept from the leadership team kept us from making good, intelligent decisions. Consequently, the company that I was with after that, we built to $190 million. We had a successful exit and sold the company for $84 million. Okay. So the key here, and this goes back to the conversation I mentioned with Walt. 80% of the businesses never sell. The number one reason, financial acumen. I don't have good data to share with you. So for any business owner that's listening to your show that's hearing this message right now, if you have any hope of selling your business, you have to adapt data into your business. You have to have the insight and those numbers to be able to share with somebody who's going to take you seriously. You want to raise capital, you need that data. You want to be able to talk to a bank and bring in big lines of credit to scale your business, you need data. If you don't have that data, you're not going anywhere, guaranteed 100%. I don't care how good you're doing right now, it will be what keeps you from going to the next level. Sorry,
Love that.
get on my soapbox for a minute.
No, I love that. And, I think anytime we do something, because to your point, a lot of times maybe the founder or people on the leadership team, maybe they aren't data driven people. Um, and you have to have that North Star to give a reason to why we're doing something.
Yep.
If we want to talk leadership, I think one of the best things or qualities of a great leader is not talking about the feature essentially, but the actual outcome, right? If we have a new part of the sales process, and we see this with sales rep adoption all the time, you want someone to adopt it. We need to help them truly understand what it means for their paycheck at the end
Right.
of the day, if they
Why?
follow the process and why.
Yes. Yes.
And if we understand that this company is being built to be sold one day, and you obviously have to be careful of uh, who you're sharing that context with at the given time. But if we understand that yes, this is a company we are building to exit one day, and people have a stake in that exit, it makes it that much easier to become data driven. So
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say for the quick fire, best business tool or resource that you're using today aside from your own program, which we'll get to in a second?
Okay. The best tool or resource. I mean, it would be. It is not okay. It's not a CRM. It's what I call a business management solution.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It's and it's one of the more robust. So there's tons of solutions out there. So, but it's not a CRM. It's everything included and packaged together. Because for the average small business owner, most of the ones that are on the market today, and I won't read off the names, but if most of those are what you need to take your business and scale into the millions. And when you get there, then you'll develop your own internal. Most of what you have in those core systems is exactly what you need to take your business where you want to go.
I love that. I love that. Do you have a name of that tool? What is it called?
My tool is Partner Pro, but it's a white label version of Go High Level.
Amazing. Partner Pro. Cool.
Yep.
For anyone listening as well, we'll obviously link everything that Eric is doing and where you can find Eric and his tools and programs for you guys. Cool. Partner Pro. And obviously we're big CRM people. We love systems and we love things that help people scale efficiently and simply. What is one bad habit founders should abandon immediately?
I don't know that I can think of one. I will tell you that the one thing that I see come up over and over and over religiously is making decisions in an echo chamber. Founders who surround themselves with yes people or who don't take constructive criticism have got to be the biggest. They have the biggest hurdle to overcome. Because you can't possibly, just like what you covered earlier, if you're only good at 2 or 3 of these core competencies, you're missing something, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't get feedback, insight, perspective on those areas where you're not as strong, and you're not willing to take constructive criticism or be willing to solicit or elicit feedback, then the likelihood of you being able to outgrow any of those shortcomings is unreasonable. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So you're your own worst enemy. And so people who don't take feedback, make decisions in echo chambers, don't want a group of people to challenge them on their thoughts and ideas. They're their own biggest enemies.
That reminds me of 2 things. The book Principles, which I think is a great book, and the meritocracy kind of concept that he has, and the person that should be answering the question is the best person to fit that. It doesn't matter what role in the organization they have. Like, who is that person that has the most educated answer to that specific question?
Yep.
And I've actually I had a job in my past that I left. I was with it for a while. And that was one of the biggest problems, was the founder would hire people to do a job and then wouldn't empower them to do the job, So essentially now, and it was exactly, you said yes, man. And it was exactly that. The people who were around them, that person or that individual, loved having those people around them, because that's how we operated, and it created a lot of problems. So I've seen that firsthand, and I think that's huge. And for founders, I think that is something you definitely have to there because a founder, you need, in my opinion, that side of crazy. You need that little bit of narcissism almost to even be a visionary and have this grandiose idea. And but you have to understand that you probably have some of that complex, and that's what makes you great. And it's also your biggest kryptonite. And you need to lean on the people around you to help you make decisions that you shouldn't be making. So, amazing. Well, the last one is, where can listeners learn more about you, Eric, your work, and MyBiz Coaches? Amazing. Amazing. Cool. All right, guys. Well, you heard it here. Check out Eric on LinkedIn. I'm guessing he's got a ton of amazing content on there as well. And then check out his website. We'll have all of the links in the description of this podcast. But Eric, man, it was a pleasure having you on. Your wealth of knowledge. You can tell about how you speak about these problems, the expertise that you have, and the experience you have in solving these. So, um, yeah, just an absolute pleasure. And I really enjoyed our conversation. So, of course, thanks, Eric.